Welcome back, America. Last time we traveled the country tasting the casseroles that grandmas turned into legends with nothing but a Pyrex, a can opener, and love thicker than cream of mushroom soup. You asked for more, so here's part 2. The remaining 25 states, each with their own one-pot masterpiece that fed families through blizzards, harvests, football games, and just because it's Sunday. From huckleberries in Montana to bison chili in Wyoming, these are the dishes that made potlucks famous and cousins fight over the crispy corner. Grab a fork, pull up a chair, and let's finish the journey. One bubbling golden, grandma-approved casserole at a time. 26. Connecticut, Clam Chowder Biscuit Casserole. In Connecticut, Grandma believed 2 things without question. Chowder should be thick enough to stand a spoon, and nothing warmed a body faster than bread baked right on top. This casserole started early, usually after a morning spent by the coast or driving home with fog on the windshield. She scrubbed fresh clams herself, prying them open with practiced patience, saving every drop of briny liquor like it was liquid gold. "That's the ocean talking," she'd say, straining it carefully so not a grain of sand survived. Potatoes were diced small and simmered low in cream and butter until tender, while bacon rendered slowly in another pan, fat pooling and popping like it knew its purpose. Onions followed, cooked gentle and sweet, never rushed. Everything met in one pot. Clams, potatoes, bacon, cream, thickened just enough to coat the back of a spoon. Then it was poured into a buttered casserole dish, steam rising, smelling like cold docks, and wool coats drying by the door. Biscuit dough, torn by hand, was scattered across the top and brushed with cream and cracked black pepper. Into the oven it went until the biscuits puffed and browned, soaking chowder underneath while staying golden on top. When served, the spoon broke through soft bread into rich, creamy chowder below. It wasn't soup anymore. It was shelter. Built to feed a table full of people who'd come in from cold wind, wet boots, and long New England days. 27. Delaware, Chicken and Dumpling Casserole. Delaware grandmas didn't cook to impress. They cooked to protect. This casserole began with a whole chicken dropped into a pot of cold water, slowly brought to a simmer until the broth turned cloudy and rich, the kind that coated your lips and made the kitchen feel warmer just by existing. No herbs, no shortcuts, just salt, pepper, and thyme. While the chicken cooked, Grandma mixed dumpling dough on the counter. Flour, milk, a little fat, rolled thick and cut into squares that looked imperfect, but purposeful. Once the chicken fell apart at the touch, the meat was shredded by hand and returned to the pot. Dumplings slipped in one by one. Everything simmered together until the dumplings puffed and soaked up flavor. Then the entire pot, broth, chicken, dumplings, was poured into a deep casserole dish and baked uncovered until the top dumplings browned lightly and the bottom stayed silky and spoon soft. The smell filled the house slowly, wrapping itself around you. When it came out of the oven, steam escaped like a sigh. Served in wide bowls, it tasted simple, rich, and deeply reassuring. No garnish, no fuss, just warmth. The kind of food that made you feel safe without ever saying the word. 28. Indiana, Amish Chicken and Noodle Casserole. In Indiana, especially Amish country, food moved at its own pace. Grandma rolled egg noodles by hand, thick and wide, laying them out on towels to dry, while a whole chicken simmered all morning. The broth turned golden and clear, rich without being loud. She shredded the chicken carefully, saving every scrap, then added the noodles straight into the pot to cook just until tender. Nothing rushed, nothing wasted. When everything was ready, it all went into the casserole. Broth, chicken, noodles, looking almost too simple to matter. But then it baked, slowly. The noodles puffed, the top dried, just enough to form light, crisp edges, while the center stayed creamy and comforting. When it came out, the dish looked humble, but the smell quieted the room. People stopped talking. Plates were filled. Seconds were taken silently. It wasn't flashy food. It was food that asked you to slow down, sit still, and be grateful. 29. Montana, Huckleberry Breakfast Casserole. Grandma waited all year for huckleberry season in the Bitterroot or Glacier country. Those tiny wild berries were worth fighting bears for. She'd come home with gallons picked high on the mountains, freeze most, and turn the rest into this breakfast casserole for hunting trips or big family mornings. Cubed day-old bread soaked overnight in eggs, milk, cinnamon, and vanilla. Layered with sausage, browned, crisp, and sharp cheddar for savoriness. Then the magic. A full pint of huckleberries folded in, bursting tart, sweet pockets against the rich custard. topped with buttered cornflake crumbs for crunch, baked until puffed golden, and the kitchen smelled like pine forests in July. Served with hot coffee, in stories of that time, she outran a grizzly for the best patch. Leftovers? Never happened. Cousins fought for the crispy edges where berries caramelized. 30. Oregon Marionberry Cobbler Breakfast Casserole. Grandma lived for Marionberry season in the Willamette Valley. Those deep purple berries, bigger and tart sweet like nothing else, picked from Hood River Farms or the U-pick patches where the rain never quite stopped. She'd come home with gallons, freeze most, and turn the fresh ones into this breakfast casserole that made rainy Oregon mornings feel like high summer. Day-old French bread torn into chunks, soaked overnight in a custard of eggs, whole milk, heavy cream, vanilla scraped from real beans, cinnamon, and a touch of nutmeg. Into the pan went the bread, then a full quart of Marionberries that stained everything purple. She dotted it with butter, then crowned it with streusel. Butter, brown sugar, flour, oats, and more cinnamon rubbed together until crumbly as Cascade gravel. Baked low at first to set the custard, then higher until the berries burst open like fireworks and the streusel turned crunchy golden, the kitchen smelling like a berry patch, warmed by rare Oregon sun. Out it came puffed and sizzling, the edges caramelized where berries met pan. Served warm, with a pitcher of cold, heavy cream poured tableside, watching it pool into purple rivers. The corner pieces, extra streusel, extra burst berries, were worth waking up early for. You ate one helping and called it breakfast, 2 and called it brunch, 3 and pretended you were just tasting for the kids. Even in December, one bite and you were back in July, barefoot in the berry rows, rain on your face, and purple fingers for days. 31. Rhode Island, Stuffy, stuffed quahog, casserole. Grandma steamed quahogs until they surrendered their briny souls, then chopped the meat fine with linguiça, sausage browned crisp, red peppers, onions, garlic, and breadcrumbs soaked in the steaming liquor. Mixed with parsley, paprika, and a suspicious amount of butter, it was the stuffing of legends. Normally piled back into shells, but for big crowds she poured it into a casserole for easier feeding. Less fuss, more eating. Topped with extra breadcrumbs, buttered golden, and a final snowfall of Parmesan. Baked until the tops browned like Narragansett Bay sunsets and the edges crisped like clam shack fries. The crispy stuffing edges were fought over like parking spots at Scarborough Beach in July. Served with lemon wedges and hot sauce, it tasted like summer clam bakes even in February. 32. South Dakota, Chislick and potato casserole. Grandma didn't wait for pheasant season to break out the Chislick. She made it year-round with whatever the hunters brought home, usually venison from the Black Hills, or beef if deer were scarce. She cubed the meat into perfect 1-inch bites, seasoned simply with garlic salt, a little Worcestershire, and black pepper coarse as prairie gravel, no fancy marinades. South Dakota Chislick is about the meat speaking for itself. Layered it raw in the deepest casserole with thick sliced russet potatoes and sweet onions that would melt into sweetness. Poured over a gravy she made from browned flour, beef stock, and a splash of red wine nobody needs to know about. Covered tight and baked low and slow until the meat turned fork tender and the potatoes drank up every drop of flavor, creamy as fresh churned butter. Last 20 minutes she uncovered it so the top potatoes crisped golden and the gravy thickened to the consistency of Black Hills soil after rain. Those crispy potato tops were prized like opening day of pheasant season. Cousins bribed, bartered, and straight up arm wrestled for the corners, where they curled dark and chewy. Served with toothpicks on the side for tradition and cold beer for the adults, it tasted like wide open spaces, Friday night lights in tiny towns, and the quiet pride of feeding a family with what the land gave you. Leftovers were breakfast with a fried egg cracked on top, and nobody in the family ever admitted it was better the second day. 33. Vermont, Cheddar apple sausage casserole. Grandma layered maple breakfast, sausage browned crisp, tart Granny Smith apples sliced thin, and blocks of sharp Vermont cheddar that melted tangy over bread cubes soaked in egg milk custard, spiced with mustard and a whisper of sage. Baked until the apples softened sweet, the sausage perfumed everything smoky, and the cheese formed golden pools. The crunchy top corners, where bread met cheese and brown darkest, were prized like peak fall foliage. Cousins called dibs before it even left the oven. Served with real maple syrup on the side for drizzling, it tasted like sugaring season mornings in crisp autumn air. 34. Virginia, Brunswick stew casserole. Grandma simmered chicken, lima beans, corn, tomatoes, and okra, thick as tidewater fog with a smoked ham hock for depth. Poured over a cornbread base, she mixed quick with buttermilk and bacon grease. Baked until the top crisped golden and the stew bubbled up like the James River at flood stage. Smoky corners with extra chicken and cornbread crunch were fought over like fresh oysters. Served with hush puppies, it tasted like Virginia history in every bite. 35. Washington, Dungeness crab and artichoke casserole. Grandma folded sweet Dungeness crab meat fresh off the boat with artichoke hearts, parmesan, mayonnaise, and a touch of Old Bay, topped with buttered breadcrumbs crisp as Puget Sound mornings. Baked until golden, and the crab scented the whole house like low tide at golden hour. Cheesy edges prized like fairy views over the sound, worth elbowing cousins for. 36. West Virginia, pepperoni roll casserole. Grandma knew coal miners needed fuel that stuck to the ribs, so she took the classic pepperoni roll, born in Vermont for lunch buckets, and turned it casserole style for big family feeds. She layered sticks of spicy pepperoni, the kind that cups and crisps, with heaps of low-moisture mozzarella that melted greasy and golden. Instead of rolling individual buns, she pressed soft Italian bread dough into the bottom of her deepest pan like a blanket, piled on the pepperoni and cheese, added another layer of dough on top, sealed the edges, and poked steam holes so it doesn't explode like the mine, brushed with garlic butter and baked until the top puffed high and the cheese oozed out the sides like lava. When it came out, the greasy cheese corners crisped dark and chewy. Those pieces were fought over like Mountaineer touchdowns on Saturday night under the lights. Cousins elbowed each other. Uncles threatened to disown anyone who took two. Served with marinara for dipping and cold root beer, it tasted like union halls, Friday night football, and the kind of love that kept men going deep underground and coming back up for supper. Leftovers were breakfast sliced cold, and nobody pretended to be ashamed. 37. Wyoming, bison chili, cornbread casserole. Grandma used lean bison, hunted or ranch raised, because beef was for everywhere else. Browned it with onions, garlic, cumin, and chili powder bold as rodeo dust storms, added beans, tomatoes, and green chilies for kick. Simmered low until thick as prairie mud. Poured into the pan, topped with cornbread batter studded with more green chilies and sharp cheddar flecks, baked until the cornbread rose golden and cracked open like high plains sky, chili bubbling up through the cracks. Crispy cornbread corners, where chilies clustered and edges caramelized, were worth roping cousins for. Actual lasso threats happened over the pan. Served with honey butter and cold milk, it tasted like wide open spaces, branding days, and the kind of love that fed cowboys through blizzards and roundups. Leftovers were breakfast with a fried egg on top, and nobody in the family ever admitted it was better reheated. 38. Alaska, salmon and potato, midnight sun casserole. In Alaska, Grandma cooked like winter was always coming, because it was. This casserole started with salmon caught by someone in the family, wrapped in freezer paper with a Sharpie date that meant more than any expiration label. She thawed thick pink fillets in the sink, patted them dry and flaked them gently, checking for bones like she was panning for gold. Yukon Gold potatoes were sliced thin and soaked to pull out the starch, then layered into the deepest Pyrex she owned. Butter went in first, real butter, no substitutes, followed by potatoes, salmon, sautéed onions, and a cream sauce made from evaporated milk, flour, and black pepper heavy enough to make you sneeze. A handful of frozen peas went in for color, and fresh dill was sprinkled like pine needles after snowfall. She layered it again, poured the last of the sauce over the top, and crowned it with crushed saltines tossed in melted butter. Baked slow and steady until the top turned golden and the edges bubbled like tidewater ice breaking loose. The smell filled the house while daylight still sat in the windows at midnight. Served hot with silence at the table and second helpings taken without asking. It tasted like survival, generosity, and a land that teaches you to never waste what feeds you. 39. Kansas, beef and biscuit harvest casserole. Kansas grandmas never asked how many people were coming. They just assumed more would show up. This casserole started in a heavy skillet with ground beef browned until it smelled deep and savory, the kind of smell that drifted out the back door and pulled neighbors in without an invitation. Onions softened next, followed by carrots sliced thick, peas straight from the freezer, and a gravy built slowly. Flour stirred into fat, broth poured in patiently, black pepper added until Grandma sneezed once and nodded. The gravy had to be thick, the color of wet Kansas soil after a summer rain. That was how you knew it was right. Everything went into the biggest casserole dish she owned, scraped clean with a spoon that had seen decades of dinners. Then came the biscuits. No rolling, no cutting. Just soft dough dropped by hand across the surface, uneven and proud. Into the oven it went, where the biscuits rose tall and golden, soaking up gravy from below while staying crisp on top. When it came out, the pan hissed softly, edges bubbling, center steaming. Plates were filled generously, seconds were expected, and silence followed. The good kind. It fed farmhands with dirt still under their nails, cousins who stayed too long, and neighbors who just stopped by. There were never leftovers, not because there wasn't enough, but because Kansas grandmas believed food was meant to disappear into people, not containers. 40. Arizona. Sonoran Green. Chili Chicken Casserole. Arizona grandmas didn't whisper flavor, they announced it. This casserole began outside, where green chilies blistered directly over flame until their skins blackened and split. They steamed in a paper bag while Grandma worked the rest. Chicken thighs were browned in a cast iron skillet with garlic, cumin, and onion until the kitchen smelled like desert rain. Long grain rice went into the casserole dish raw, mixed with chicken broth, tomatoes, and a heavy hand of spice. The peeled chilies were chopped and layered in thick ribbons, followed by the chicken and a blanket of Monterey Jack cheese. She didn't stir. This was architecture, not soup. Into the oven it went, uncovered, until the rice drank everything up and the top caramelized into something dangerously crispy. When it came out, the surface shimmered with heat, served with lime wedges and tortillas, eaten slowly because the heat built with every bite. Grandma watched you sweat and smiled. This was food meant to wake you up, ground you, and remind you where you were standing. 41. Nebraska runs a casserole. Grandma didn't bother with individual pockets when feeding a threshing crew. She made runs a casserole. Ground beef browned with heaps of onion and shredded cabbage until sweet and tender, seasoned simply with salt and plenty of black pepper. No fancy spices needed on the prairie. Layered in a deep pan with Swiss cheese slices and crescent roll dough pressed in like a blanket. Baked until the top turned flaky gold and the bottom soaked up all the juices. The corners got extra crispy. Those went to whoever helped chop cabbage. Served with mustard on the side and cold milk, it tasted like Cornhusker football Saturdays and German-Russian roots. 42. Nevada Prime Rib Hash Casino Casserole. After late-night shifts or big wins, Grandma turned leftover prime rib from the casino buffet into this hash casserole. Diced tender beef mixed with crispy fried potatoes, bell peppers, onions, and a splash of Worcestershire for depth. Poured into a pan, topped with eggs cracked right on and sharp cheddar blizzard, baked until eggs set, sunny side, and cheese bubbled like jackpot lights. The smoky beef edges crisped in the oven. Those pieces were gold. Served with hot sauce and black coffee at 3 a.m., it was Vegas comfort food that kept you going till dawn. 43. New Hampshire Baked Bean and Brown Bread Casserole. Grandma simmered navy beans overnight with salt pork, molasses thick as maple sap, and mustard sharp enough to clear winter colds. Layered in the bean pot with steamed brown bread, sliced thick, raisin-studded for sweetness. Baked low and slow until the beans turned creamy and the bread soaked up the smoky sweetness. The top crust got dark and chewy. Prized pieces went to grandkids who split wood. Served with coleslaw tangy as a Yankee retort, it warmed bones after sugaring or town meetings. 44. New Jersey Taylor Ham Egg and Cheese Casserole. Grandma layered thick sliced Taylor ham, pork roll if you're from South Jersey, browned crisp, scrambled eggs fluffy with milk, and sharp American cheese that melted like diner magic. Everything on Kaiser roll cubes is soaked overnight for softness. Bake until the top is browned and the edges are puffed, the salty ham corners crisped, fought over like shore traffic spots. Served with ketchup bottles and strong coffee, it tasted like boardwalk mornings and diner counters. 45. North Dakota Noefla and Sausage Casserole. Grandma made Noefla dumplings from scratch. Flour, eggs, grated potato for tenderness, rolled and cut into little pillows. Boil them soft, then toss with browned ring, sausage, and onions caramelized slowly in butter. Poured into a casserole with cream sauce thick as prairie snowdrifts. Baked until the top crisped golden and the dumplings soaked up smoky flavor. Edges turned chewy crunchy, prized like first day pheasant opener. Served with sauerkraut tangy as a minus 40-degree wind, it warmed bones and souls against blizzards. 46. Colorado, high-altitude green chili breakfast casserole. At elevation, Grandma knew the rules changed. More eggs, more cheese, more patience. Cubed bread filled the pan first, stale on purpose, then browned breakfast sausage, roasted Pueblo green chilies, and handfuls of sharp cheddar and pepper jack. Eggs and whole milk were whisked until frothy and poured over everything until it looked like too much. It rested overnight in the fridge, soaking and settling. Morning bake was slow and careful. The casserole puffed like a mountain cloud, edges pulling away golden and crisp. The smell dragged everyone out of bed. When cut, steam escaped like breath in cold air. It tasted spicy, rich, and deeply comforting. The kind of breakfast that held you until dinner. Grandma served it with strong coffee and said altitude builds character. Nobody argued. 47. Iowa, pork chop and corn casserole. This was farmland food, built to last. Grandma breaded thick pork chops, browned them in butter until golden, then layered them into a casserole over creamed corn, so sweet it almost tasted like sugar. Sliced onions and potatoes followed, soaking up every drop of fat and flavor. Butter was everywhere, dotted, melted, unapologetic. The dish baked long enough for the pork to soften and the corn to caramelize around the edges. When served, the chops cut easily with a fork, the corn creamy and rich beneath. It tasted like quiet Sundays, open fields, and nothing urgent waiting outside. 48. Maryland, crab imperial casserole. This wasn't a casserole you rushed. Maryland grandmas treated crab like royalty, and crab imperial was handled with ceremony. Fresh lump crab meat, picked carefully, checked twice for shells, sat in a wide bowl while Grandma mixed the binder separately. Mayonnaise, Dijon mustard, a careful shake of Old Bay, a squeeze of lemon, and just enough breadcrumbs to hold everything together, nothing more. The crab was folded in gently, barely stirred, as if it might bruise. Breaking the lumps was a crime. The mixture was spooned into a buttered casserole dish, smoothed just enough, then topped with a light dusting of paprika and breadcrumbs. Into the oven it went, and Grandma never left the kitchen. She watched through the glass like a hawk, waiting for the exact moment when the edges set and the top turned lightly golden. No bubbling, no browning too far. Overcooked crab was unforgivable. When it came out, it smelled like the Chesapeake at low tide. Rich, briny, clean. Served with nothing fancy, maybe just lemon wedges and quiet respect. One bite told you everything. Sweet crab, creamy richness, gentle heat. This wasn't comfort food meant to smother you. It was precision food, proud and coastal, just like Maryland itself. 49. Massachusetts, Boston baked bean casserole. Massachusetts grandmas believed in patience and consequences. This casserole began the night before with navy beans soaked until they swelled and softened, ready for the long haul. In the morning, they were layered into a deep dish with chunks of salt pork, sliced onions, dark molasses poured slow and thick, brown sugar, dry mustard, and just enough water to barely cover everything. The oven was set low, and the beans baked for hours. No rushing, no peeking too often. As time passed, the liquid reduced, the beans absorbed sweetness and smoke, and a dark crust formed on top, thick and sticky like lacquer. Grandma broke that crust only once, pressing it back down so it could form again. By the end, the top was nearly black, the inside creamy and rich. The smell filled the house, sweet, smoky, stubborn. Served hot, sometimes with brown bread on the side, sometimes alone. It wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It tasted like history, restraint, and the kind of endurance built into New England bones. 50. Missouri, gooey butter cake casserole. Missouri's most famous casserole started as a mistake, and Grandma never tried to fix it. A yellow cake base pressed into the pan, buttery and dense. On top came a custard made from cream cheese, eggs, vanilla, powdered sugar, and more butter than seemed reasonable. It was poured thick and slow, settling into every crack. Into the oven it went, baked just long enough for the edges to set firm while the center stayed molten, wobbling slightly if you shook the pan. The top cracked and blistered like summer pavement. When it came out, forks sank straight through, sticking slightly as they pulled back. Plates were scraped clean, fingers sometimes used when nobody was looking. It was rich, unapologetic, and impossible to eat politely. Grandma never explained it, never apologized for it, and never cut small pieces. You took what you could handle and lived with the consequences. That was Missouri cooking. Accidental Brilliance, proudly served. And that's the full map. America. 50 states, 50 grandmas, 50 casseroles that prove love is best served bubbling at 350 degrees. From the first funeral potatoes to the last crispy cornbread corner, every dish carried the same message. Eat your home. These weren't just recipes. They were the reason we gathered. The comfort after storms, the excuse to set an extra place just in case. If this series made you smell your grandma's kitchen one more time, hit that like button like you're claiming the corner piece, subscribe, ring the bell, and tell us in the comments, which state's casserole are you making this weekend? Now go dig out that old Pyrex, the table's waiting, and somewhere a grandma is smiling.